you, Vice Chancellor. I really had an extremely interesting cocktail party outside. I've met so many of my old friends from the industry, and I've been very much associated with Coventry over the years, and to find them, to talk with them here before the lecture, it's given me great pleasure. So thank you all for having given me that pleasure in the last half hour. Now, in considering what to talk about, the Bugatti lecture, when I was asked to do so in the summer, I recall wondering why my friend, late Hugh Conway, who was a very great friend of mine, and Hugh Conway, his son is here, I see here, what I should talk about, and why he was so preoccupied, Hugh Sr., was so preoccupied with idolizing the life of the French designer Bugatti, rather than our English one, such as Bentley. So this gave me the idea of a title, British and French Vehicle Designs. And I was intending to do a partnership, if you like, English-French, starting pre-World War I. And my friend Steve Cropley, who's unfortunately, he was going to come, the editor of Autocar, was going to give me a lot of indications of a partnership over the years. But instead of that, I'm doing something quite different. The circumstances have enormously changed since June. There's a worldwide acceptance of the global warming and the necessity of reducing carbon consumption. In the world crisis, can you believe this? In June it would be unbelievable. In the world crisis, US car firms are begging billions of dollars to avoid bankruptcy. The car industry of the rest of the world is similar in meltdown. We in this country have effectively achieved that some years ago for our indigenous car industry. Therefore, I believe it is preferable to talk tonight, which I'm going to propose to do, on the design fundamentals from my long experience, especially energy efficiency of various categories of vehicles, which may be helpful for you design students. I hope I can see some who I hope will be design students here. Helpful for you when you will be designing vehicles for the future. Therefore, I believe that efficiency of energy consumption. I'll start with this, see where this works. Yes. Now, this is a chart which I did for the presentation in the 1972 from the Royal Institution when I was presenting the Moulton Bicycle. It contains much more than that. It is specifically up the vertical column there is the specific fuel consumption in energy. It is in English units, but per passenger mile. I've got a conversion here if anyone wants to use any other units. But that's the specific fuel consumption per passenger mile of very against velocity there. It's a log plot because the resistance of the vehicle when you go faster obviously increases exponentially. So at the top, it's bad to be at the top, it's good to be at the bottom. And so taking the top there, that's the worst possible efficiency. I had a powerboat in '69, I think it was, and took part in the cow stalk race, and that had the most appalling consumption. And it was almost a terrible riding thing, and I gave up. The bumping was unbelievable. So I did develop a seat for it, a sprung seat for it. It had about a 10-inch travel, which made it more acceptable, but it's a hopeless thing, so, and very bad from a consumption point of view. Passing there, that's a cruising ship. I think that was a Canberra at the time. I have no intention of going on a cruise anyway myself. But if for people who do go, and they should have sails, and so entirely wind-driven, and the passengers could be reduce their obesity by tending the sails. So I think all cruising ships of the future should be sailing ships. Then coming vertically down, the same sort of speed. The hovercraft, that's a pity. That I imagine that didn't really prevail. I suppose with the service costs of it, but it's quite efficient, you see, in relation to other waterborne vehicles. Then coming down, we come, and by the way, looking at aircraft, I never flew myself, but the interesting thing is that aircraft, how good, relatively good, bearing in mind the speed of the Concorde was. The efficiency, the thermal efficiency of a Concorde, I believe, was something over 40% due to the high ram velocities. So it was interesting to see that in comparison with, I suppose that was VC-10, that might be the 707. But it wasn't too bad considering this enormous speed. But leaving aside that, now coming down this here, there we come to an indulgence. And so we'll have a look at that indulgence. Now that's in the 1970s. That was a Shadow. I was touring in France, and that was one of my stowaway bicycles, and I was going for a ride. And my friend she was going to drive. I think the journey was fairly flat, but I wasn't necessarily going to ride up the hill again. She drove down. But the French onlookers said, how bizarre, quel bizarre. They see somebody getting out of Rolls Royce and onto riding a bicycle. So the French didn't understand it very well. But now that represented extravagance of the first order for fuel. Now I want to make this point very clearly that in those days, fuel was not a prime consideration of cost. And I remember Harry Grills, who was the chief engineer of Rolls-Royce, at the time that he was doing the Shadow. The Shadow was an extremely advanced car in the 60s, and I think Jim will recognize us from a Jaguar point of view how advanced that unit chassis was of the Shadow. Harry Grills said, do you think new owners of this car, will mind paying £5 for filling it up? Filling up the petrol tank. Well, the petrol tank was quite decent size, about 20-ish gallons, I suppose. But so obviously it's irrelevant. And so in those days, if you wanted to spend money in this indulgence, well, do so. There was no feeling of how awful it is that we're consuming so much carbon. And I, in my life, in deep, not regret at all, but just looking back, the tons and tons of carbon that I must have burnt, and enormously enjoy having done so. But I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be a reformed character, and I certainly would say that I was intending to come up in a crew-built car, Bentley, then which I decided to do back in June. How nice it would be to celebrate this important event that I've been asked to lecture about, to come to honor it, to come as if people are coming in their Bugattis or the extravagant. I'll come in my Bentley, making the point I'm representing the English side, whereas the Bugattis are representing the French side. Instead of that, I had good remorse and came up in my Prius. Now, the Prius is an extreme, which is hated by Top Gear Man. That's right. He's considered a terrible car. It is one of the most interesting and attractive cars actually to use and drive. The electric transmission is absolutely fabulously good. And Mel, my driver, we have also, the interesting thing is to see how the fuel consumption is going. I predict, well, we'll do well through 55-ish, but actually we just arrived at Coventry, maddening, not at 60, but 59 to the gallon. So having come up the Fosse Way and enjoying every bit of it. So that's an example, if you like, of efficiency. Now, let's move on. No, first of all, let's move on, sorry. Now, the other extravagance that I had in my life is motorcycles. Now, that's myself there as a kid, 17, with a Scott. Now, a Scott was, I don't suppose any of you younger people have even heard of a Scott. It was an extremely interesting advanced car. It was an advanced bicycle in the 30s, or even, I suppose, late 20s. It was twin-cylinder, two-stroke, water-cooled. it's a very nice balance. Of course, the pistons, the cylinders the pistons are going up and down like that, so you've got primary balance and even firing because it's two-stroke. The fuel consumption, I wouldn't know what it was. I mean, I'm sure it's absolutely appalling, and one was only concerned with the amyl carburetor not leaking. So, but I did long journeys on it, and it was great pleasure. That was before the war. Now, then I had, just after the war, a Vincent HRD. That was my first rubber suspension. It had a rear had a dorsal rear spring there, rubber spring there. And it was extremely good rear suspension, of great rigidity. And unfortunately, I never had, which I regret deeply, the Rapide. Now, the Vincent Rapide was the motorcycle of the period. And, a wonderful thing. It would really, you could use it at 100 miles an hour. But I never had that. That was the single cylinder of the Comet. So go on. Then, post-war, I went through a variety of motorcycles. That one was a Honda. The Honda, they went to Ed Turner from Coventry. He did the Triumph twins, in which he chose for even firing. So he had, it was on a 4-stroke. The pistons were going up and down together, and it alternated the fire. So the firing was even, but the balance, of course, was like a single, and very bad. Now, Honda took the other route. They had the alternative 180-degree crank, so to get an uneven firing. So that's an interesting point. Then I enjoyed that. And then the next one had a series of BMWs. Now, they very much survived to today, of course. They're transverse engine, where you get the balance, the primary balance, and the even firing. The only trouble is that the cylinders stick out and you mustn't fall down on them. But interesting front fork. So that is really that. Now, motorcycles, in considering what sort of vehicle for the future, vehicle designers should be looking at. I have come to the conclusion, and I'm sure you may disagree, and please have an opportunity of disagreeing a little bit later on, that a motorcycle is a hopeless thing, really, from a consumption point of view. And the only thing that is good, I think, is the possibility of a scooter. Now, a scooter, Tony Spillane, 2 of his friends are here tonight. They are scooterites and scooter enthusiasts. And I think a scooter is an acceptable thing from a consumption point of view. And whereas the motorcycle, I mean, do you realize that the present-day motorcycles, the fuel consumption is appalling. I mean, 40 to 50 miles per gallon. These big super bikes. The consumption is absolutely appalling. By virtue, their aerodynamics are hopeless, of course, and they have, in order to get adhesion, they have tires about that wide on the rear. The consumption of the rolling resistance consumption must be appalling. So, I think for the future that motorcycles should only be regarded as things for indulgence, but due to the heavy consumption, with the exception of the scooter. Now, let's move on. So that's summarize what I said. The electric Solex is a very interesting idea. It's just been announced. They remember what the Solex. It had a little 2-stroke petrol engine mounted and driving the front wheel. So it's just been announced. I can actually go back to that if I can remember how to go back. That one, is that right? Yes, there it is. So it's just been announced. It's got a battery there, and there's an electric motor on the front wheel. It's rather interesting, isn't it? And that'll be a rather interesting utility vehicle, electric propulsion. Right, let's go forward. So we go. So now that is a vehicle. Going back again, I'm sorry to be fumbling about. If we go look down the energy chart, we come to going down there. We come to an extremely efficient thing, which is a bus or a coach. It represents about the most efficient. The railway train, electric railroads, may be better, but the bus or coach is an extremely efficient vehicle, and all very, very worthy of development and pressing forward, particularly the coach. And I did one in, let's go there, in 1969. What had happened, we'd got our Hydrolastic going at BMC, and Harriman, who was the boss of BMC at that time, said, I said to Issigonis and myself, look, you've made these cars ride well. What about doing a bus? Or he wanted a lorry. And so we made, and the only time I really fundamentally disagreed with Alec Issigonis, he had suggested a box section frame. And I knew from work that I'd done earlier that the torsional stiffness required for independent suspension on a vehicle that's once been enormously stiff. And I'd consulted Maurice Olley about it, I remember at the time. And so I made that one, which is a structure, geodetic structure, or not geodetic, but a square frame, space frame construction, which is extremely good with a bogie there, bogie there, and a bogie there, and extremely good for a ride, and that was in '69. Now that evoked the hostility of the late Lord Stokes. He didn't like it at all, and he told me to scrap it, or he didn't like it at all. And so I didn't scrap it, obviously. It's now in the Science Museum at Wroughton, and I've just heard they want to acquire it and to run it about. It runs perfectly well. So it'll be one of the few vehicles which, from prototype to a museum, without anything of production. But there it is at Mara in '69, exhibiting extremely good standards of road holding and standards. So there it is. That's an example of a failure, but one doesn't regret it. So we'll move on. Now, we come now to extremely important. I had the good fortune to work with Alec Issigonis, who was there, and it happened in this way that one needs to have any luck. One needs a conjunction of events. And the 60s were an extremely good time. We'd all been pressed down by the war, and then the 50s we got out of the war, the restriction of manufacture and so on, with materials had gone, and it was absolutely bubbling with new things. I mean, the Jaguar, the Rolls-Royce, and then the motorbikes. Everyone was, and of course the Concorde had started at that time. So the 60s were an extremely dynamic time. And I very much make the point that we are in this terrible crisis, but one comes out of a crisis. It's quite, I mean, the war was quite a different thing. There was an enemy trying to invade the island. It's quite different. But in this case, it's a financial thing, primarily due to idiotic things having been done, but we'll come out of it, and there'll be a tremendous opportunity, particularly for the students who are going into design, to create new vehicles and new things. And so what I'm talking about tonight are trying to inspire them to have a go and indicate certain directions that might be favorable in going. So we had this opportunity in the late 50s, and Issigonis had gone to Elvis here in Coventry, and it was asked to make a new car by the boss, whose name now the boss of Elvis at the time has just gone for a second from me, the name. But so he was asked to do this, and Issigonis was impressed with the cone spring that I was doing at the time, and so he was anxious to collaborate with me on that. So let's go on again. then that was, the 50s were, now here we come, this is the first time that France comes in. France will come in very often in my talk, by the way, so the Bugatti people don't feel denied the French connection, because I shall be so I'm very much dropping French in. So here's Issigonis' sketch. AI. In 1955, indicate this was the DS, the Citroen DS, which came out at that time. It had a high pressure oleopneumatic suspension. Extremely, the quality of ride was fantastic, and it was applied to the 6-cylinder Citroen first of all, and but the complexity of it, you see, that was the gas egg there, and it was heavily levered. It needed a roller bearing there. It's a high leverage thing and a high pressure, and therefore it leaks, and therefore it needed a pump all the time. And so that was, we were admired the behavior of it. In no way would it enter the scale of things of a mass-produced, low-cost thing, mass-produced. And then, but that's one of his sketches that shows the trading link arms there, and then the anti-roll bar there, and that's a sketch of the trading arm, twin trading arms at the front. So the ability to sketch all the time is an enormously valuable thing. And third, that students that I've enjoyed very much the visit of a student to me at Bradford from your design school who has sketched beautifully. So James, I think you sketched very well. So I think I have seen you, so you may still be here. So let's go on. Then, but this is the significant thing. Here is a deux chevaux. Now, I had one of these, bought one, this is a French one, I think French built one, to carry my canoe. And of course, I was interconnected mechanical interconnection between front and rear, with biomechanical linkage. And I was struck by this legendary ride of the deux chevaux. It's as a bogey, in effect a bogey, it makes a bogey by the interconnection one wheel or the other. And I was absolutely struck by this thing. And we therefore, Issigonis and I, were very much considered, couldn't we do this thing, not by the primitive means of a link and of hooks and a coil spring. It even had mass dampers, a terrible thing, mass dampers in the wheel, a very expensive way of doing it. But so couldn't we do it more simply by hydraulic means? Now, not the hydraulic at all of this Citroen, which is more like aviation hydraulics, I mean high pressure, but a low pressure thing. So that was the birth of the. So yes, I'm doing checking the frequencies, measuring at once the frequencies between pitch. You see a lower frequency than the bounce, which is the secret of interconnection. They're doing the actual testing on that vehicle. So so that was the installation we did on the Elvis, which shows that I had two of these cone springs, these things which I'd developed before, things like that, which were back to back, there to there, with an ordinary damper, interconnected down the middle there. So that was actually the concept of Hydrolastic. So that thing was born then in the 50s. Just summarizing that. But it's just dealing with some politics was enormously significant. 56, Len Lord, later Lambert, boss of BMC. So that was an important point to note there, that the vision of the boss of BMC, Harriman and Lord, who said that he was conceiving the need for a small car to get rid of the bubble cars. So it was the development of it. Was we worked with Hydrolastic at Dunlop up the road here at Foleshill Road. The Dunlop Aviation division was extremely vital and vigorous Coventry outfit that I had the deepest pleasure in working with. I'm very glad to see some of the old friends there who are here tonight. And so they picked up the idea that it should be made at Dunlop as opposed to our little tiny factory, far too small to spend some Moulton. So here we are at Bradford, in the same shop, but the stable building, same shop we make our bicycles in now, with the fatigue testing. And the rigorous method of testing was absolutely essential in order to get something that can last a car life without trouble. Now this is an important method that we use. These are the sections of the rubber spring here, which have been hydraulically tested, and the diaphragm underneath there. Been on the fatigue test rig. And so what we did, and it's a very important discipline, we don't believe in whim engineering. In other words, you test something, and as we know that spin has no part in engineering at all. You've got if you have a vision and you check it from fundamentals, and then you may well be wrong. But the iron test is how does it perform in durability and performance. So we, on the test rigs, there's a section of these damn things, and each one, the manner of its failure, we analyze the manner of its failure, and then made a logical deduction from the failure, step by step. So that's a procedure that I very much advocate. Observe, do the test, observe how it fails, let it speak to you, and then examine what it's telling you, and then take the next step. So that we achieved it that way. Now that shows the running from the invention there, if you like, in '56 through the various stages, and to get from there to there. You need that process. Simply having the concept what you do, checking the validity of it fundamentally, and then test, and you jump from one stage to the other. Simply, look, no computer can take you from there to there. It needs simply basic fundamentals and observation and testing, and being intellectually rigorous to get there. Now, there's a conjunction that's a political thing, if you like, but of enormously important, that if you are in a relation to a big corporation, politics lurk all the time. But why it works so well, I'm talking about the first one here, that for success it needs the complete unification of purpose of the car manufacturer. That was BMC, and they were extremely enlightened in the 60s. Leonard Lord and Harriman were extremely enlightened bosses. And the interesting thing that might be relevant, that I asked Sidney Wheeler, who's the secretary of the company of BMC, and therefore on the board, I said, how do you, in this great company, which is BMC, which is an amalgamation of so many firms dealing with such vast issues, how do you come to a decision at your board? And he said, oh, this is quite easy. You see, look, we agonize about it. We have this principle. Can the car that we are proposing be acceptable to the public? In other words, is it marketable? Number one. Number two, can it be made at the price in relation to the cost that the labor would not strike? Because striking was a threat at that time. And number three, does it make a return to the shareholders? No, to the shareholders. At no time did they think, how can we operate to maximize our own benefit? And that was the enormous difference between the culture at that time. That the company was the thing that mattered. No question whether they think of selling in the company to put an advantage to their own pocket. Absolutely not at all. They would simply say, can you sell the bloody thing or not? At the price? In other words, is it marketably acceptable? Can it be made at the labour cost? In those days, very much the threat, of course, of striking. I'm talking about the 60s. And would it make a return? Not how much return. Would it make a return for the shareholders? So they were the consideration. That was the culture at that time. Interesting. So that's why. But now that you look here down, that's one. After Arcis, despite many changes of management, which there was the Triumph, and then Standard, and then finally Rover. And it did survive, because on its merits, it did survive right up to the end, until the whole thing, until the company was obviously not failed, but sold to the Chinese. So, and the interesting that all the suspensions of that were made up the wholesale road at Dunlop, and it was very nice to have the Dunlop the Dunlop factory managers here tonight. I'm very, very pleased with that. And 7 million cars. Then there was the Hydrolastic was announced in the launch in the 1100 Morris 1100. In 1962, and there it is at Bradford, on our, showing the caricature, if you like, of interconnection. I mean, we're riding flat over that bumps. And with that particular car sold, I think, 2 million, and outsold the Ford Cortina for at least a decade. That had the body designed, the body shape was designed by the young Farina, by Sergio Pininfarina, was a great collaborator. Now, then we come to the consideration of packaging. Here we have the conventional. I suppose one would say that the conventional would be, I think that's actually, the picture might be a Morris Minor, but the conventional, which I suppose is attributable to Panhard, I suppose. It's all referred to as a Panhard layout with the 4.5 engine, propeller shaft, and driving axle, rigid axle at the back. And that was a universal throughout the world, really. The one big competitor of that, of course, was the Ford, the Model T Ford. And that was a brilliant car. And I always think that the present, the great-great-grandson of the Ford, who said their trouble, as you know, about to go bankrupt or fearing that, they said, we've got the wrong business system. You dig up your grandfather's grave and ask him what sort of car to make. I mean, it was the design of the cars that are unacceptable now. But Model T Ford is a brilliant thing. And of course, he Ford he was trying to dominate everything. He was dominating not only the principal mass production, but he was dominating the vehicle for too long. So that's a lesson there, that one shouldn't cling to something too long. But certainly not just change it every afternoon like today, or try to. Then that one is the Traction Avant. Here we are in France, and here we are in Citroën, and that's the great aberration of for Citroën, the work of Citroën. There is the 4.5 engine turned round, driving the front wheels, allowing, by the way, the lower seating position, and of course the wonderful stability which is inherent, despite what Jeremy Clarkson says. The front wheel drive is the most sensible way of doing it. Then we have the Volkswagen. Now that was the other thing comparable, if you like, to the Model T Ford, as being extremely exceptional away from the norm, the Panhard norm, and with the rear engine. Air-cooled, flat floor, stuck out at the back. Very good accommodation in the passenger cabin, but it fundamentally, of course, has this terrible disadvantage of the swing axle and the weight stuck out to the back. I think Porsche have probably given up their swing axles. I think they've done it a day or two ago, but they're still basically wrong to stick the engine out of the back, stuck out of the back, I believe. And so Sir Issigonis and I, we used to have great fun with, as it were, hating the Volkswagen and mocking it rather. His great invention, or not invention, but the fact that he carried it through so wonderfully effectively, is the transverse engine, front-wheel drive. So it had the merit of maintaining the front-wheel drive, but putting the engine sideways, instead of invading so much of the let's go back on that one for a second, if we can. You see, go back one more. Now I shall get in trouble. There you see how much the passenger space is pushed back by virtue of the fore and aft front-wheel drive engine. Now we come forward again if we can. Twice, I think. Here we are. So there it is. Now, there's the concept of wheels at each corner and very small wheels. He also used to say, merely make the wheels big enough to take the brakes. Well, he might have got them a little bit too small, I don't know. But certainly the idea of making wheels bigger and bigger is absolutely crazy. If you read anything in the modern car report, they're all making the wheels bigger. The last thing in the world you want to make them big, you want to make them smaller. So assume you have got enough room for the brake. And so that is the concept of the Mini, which it's lovely to see one in the foyer there. Very beautiful one too. So that one had the rubber suspension there. The very economical space, and of course one could modulate the rate, the stiffness of the spring between front and rear. We had a great deal of fun with that, with a cam, the shape of the cam, which operated on this part here. So you can alter the shape of the loading curve by that. All right, it's bad news when it creeps, but then that's bad luck. Then you get a new one. So that's that. Now, that's the most important thing of all, that in developing something new and radical, one must always, I believe, show its superiority by competition. So the great success of the Mini really was underlined by the the 3 wins, outright wins on the Monte Carlo Rally. They were by the way, they were all the winning Minis were always interconnected, fore and aft interconnection. But we had screw-down valves on the floor that one could modulate the amount of interconnection as required. So on a rough section, you had it open. On a less rough section, you tighten it up a bit. So that was adjusting the degree of interconnection. So. Then what I believe is this, that if a small car is well enough sprung, it can be actually used to be driven in. So this, if you like, it's got a slight sniff of the IQ, the new Toyota car, which is just been introduced, where they have actually a 3-seat arrangement. So I used that car during the first petrol crisis, the second petrol crisis rather. The first one was 56, and the second one was 70-something. I used in the 70-something to be driven in. So I used to be able from Bradford to London, driven in, and I could read or write in it. The quality of the ride was such that you could sit in the back of that car and write. Now, it's quite difficult. I came up today in my Prius, was sitting in the back. You certainly couldn't ride in that thing. You can in this stupid little thing. And I did 100,000 miles in it. I used to come always my trips up to Coventry, to Dunlop. I always came in there until I was later to use other cars. Now, then so that is an interesting thing, that the IQ, look at the silhouette of it. It is identical to the real Mini. That's interesting, isn't it? You see the IQ is the thing behind. Now, but it's higher. I imagine the front is higher for pedestrian impact. I imagine that. I don't know. Certainly, he's got big wheels. I didn't draw them. I haven't to put the wheels on because they're so big, but they are big. And higher, I suppose it goes, and certainly Spen would not approve the visibility of the IQ. The visibility of the Mini is excellent. I'm sure he would approve of that. Certainly visibility from the point of view of the windscreen pillars is very good. So that, I believe, that the future car, the car design should be very much directed, now talking about the energy thing, should be very much directed by derivatives of that concept, is my belief, which I'm saying there. I'm just summarizing there. Yes, so the drag of it is appalling, as you know. I remember Issigonis said, we all said that the drag of this car is terrible, the Mini. Oh yes, he said, it's like people said he's like a brick, but to which he replied, it's a small brick. But look, it's terrible. The fuel consumption, as I said, the fuel consumption of the Prius, we came up here just under 60 miles per gallon, 59 miles per gallon. Now, my Mini, which is the one you saw before, which I very much still use, it doesn't do 40, or just does 40 per gallon. Now, so that shows, well, part of that badness comes from the air resistance. Now, let's go back now to the energy chart. Now, we've walked down. We've dealt with the abomination, or not the delight, if you like, but the wickedness of consumption of a big car. A big Jaguar possibly might be like that, a Bugatti. I'm sure a large Bugatti would be rather extravagant in petrol. So that comes into the category of extravagance and indulgence. And they have a naughty. And the motorcycle we've ruled out by also that's inefficient. So we come down, we've admired the coach there, and we are going to, and there might be, that might be the virtuous scooter. It doesn't look like a scooter, and its speed might be better than that. But now we come into that of absolute total virtue, which is human mobility. And here we see a very extraordinary thing is this, that you notice all other vehicles, all other classes of vehicles, the faster you go, the more energy you're using, therefore more inefficient. But this is the extraordinary thing, because the human being is so hopeless from the point of view of running, compared to a cheetah or a cat or anything, an animal, and hopeless compared in swimming. That the human being, when he takes, for instance, a kayak, he advances in speed and uses less energy. And when he stops walking and goes on a bicycle, he advances enormously in speed and uses the least energy of all. So from an energy point of view, the bicycle is the goody. The things that is my cry. So we'll come on to that. So. And that's a joke, that was published the other day in the Financial Times. That it shows before the crash, but you see that the bicycles throughout the world are made in increasing numbers. So the European bicycles of these sort of things are made trivial numbers, but the classical bicycle is made in enormous numbers, whereas the car, of course, will be absolutely down like that. So I make the point that the human-driven vehicle. Now, let's consider for a moment history. It's important to go backwards in order to see where to go in the future. Now, the origin is French, you'll be glad to hear. This is Michaud. So he's not Citroën, but he's not a Bugatti, but he's Michaud. And Michaud in France, he invented the crank driving the wheel. That's his drawing. Around, I would think, around 1850-ish, I would think. Before that, there was the penny farthing of the hobby horse with setting your feet on the ground. That was much earlier on. And then there's Macmillan with operating by levers. But Michaud, French Michaud, he developed the crank, which gave birth to this. Now, there's a lovely site, again in France, in Paris. Now, there's a Michaud machine, which with the girls, you see, all having enormous fun. You see the men photographing and admiring them. Then look at the girls rushing around on their front drive. Do you see? They're driving through the crank straight onto the front wheel. And it's a charming thing. The use of bicycle for, they were enjoying this enormous advance in speed. Certainly, the skirts flying, and the boys here, men admiring that. It's a nice view. Then, that's my grandfather on a man about town, as it were. He was Lincoln's Inn, Lincoln's Inn being a barrister. And here there's a Michaud, but the antiquarians, or the bicycle antiquarian club, are extremely sensitive. And I said, wrongly said, it's on a Michaud. No, it isn't on a Michaud, but it's a Michaud type. So apparently in France, in Paris, at that time, they were making, from the Michaud design, they were making many derivatives of it. So it is one of them. But it's certainly the date is right, 1864. So it was just a man about town using a bicycle. And then that, of course, what happened then? We moved very much into Coventry. Now, it was Coventry that, here in Coventry, that the Michaud design, the French Michaud design, was taken up and enlarged by as the gearing is direct, obviously, the larger the wheel, it's direct drive, so you have to have a larger wheel to go fast. And there you see the hopeless way of getting on the thing, and so that was obviously making the thrust for a breakaway invention, which happened in this country, here in Coventry. Now, there it is. Now, Starley. That's the Starley bicycle, which is the great breakaway of the use of the no longer direct drive, no the chain drive, the Reynolds chain, roller chain, and the equal size wheel, nearly equal size wheel. But all sinisterly, there was the classical frame had not been born then. You see, that's curved on a crazy way, and a tiny little kingpin there. But that was the key thing. That, driving that, and allowing the freedom of the size of the wheel by enlarging that and making that smaller. So that was the birth of it. And there were the names in the Rover. Now, I think the next one is probably a Rover. Yes. Now, there is the Rover. Now, it's all, here is the absolute birth of the Sato bicycle, the classic bicycle, which I term the classic, an entirely sound. You see, it's got a proper a seat tube there and a head tube there, and curvy forks give a bit of suspension, and here. So that is the birth of the classical bicycle, which basically hasn't been in fundamentals altered, enormously developed, but hasn't been altered for all these years. So here is here's my father as a boy there's been by the way, very I ought to have mentioned before, at the same time, 1889, the invention by Dunlop of the pneumatic tire. There you can see the pneumatic tire there. So that there was the classical frame, and the antiquarians they say it is a rudge. It could be absolutely today. It's got a Brooks saddle. Nice springs there. It's got the only odd thing, of course, which soon went out, is the spoon brake acting on the tire, which is not good. So, so at that time, here we are in France, racing in France, the classical bicycle there. then again, that is an interesting one. That's Elgar, the music designer, author, with in 1903. So that has a break on the rim, you see, in the proper way. But otherwise, the frame is completely passable. So right, this is today. Then we shift forward to 1956. Now, I bought a Hitchens. A Hitchens is a lovely London bike. It had a little bit of oddity. It had the curly flare forks. The idea was to try and make it sprung a bit, but it didn't work at all. But it was actually done in order to differentiate. When the people saw it racing, they could see, oh, that's a Hitchens. So I was so enchanted. That was the petrol crisis of the first one, the Suez crisis, and I was so enchanted about how wonderful it was. And at the same time, you see, I was working with Issigonis on the Mini, and I saw his rational, basic thinking, and I was inspired by that, to have a go myself at doing something on a bicycle. So that I did. The first thing to do was check the fundamentals. Now, it was a horizontal recumbent bicycle, which had been used again in France before the war. And it was a velocycle, it's called, and it raced quite a lot in France. Was that the way to go? And so I bought that one and tried it out. It was the FH Grubb made in London from the man of the French. And immediately saw the advantage in speed, but I found that the balance was unacceptable by virtue of the fact that the center of gravity was too low, and so therefore it was one wasn't able to balance it easily. So also an extremely cumbersome thing. And in those days, one was always bothered with water from the lorries getting on one. So I discounted that. Then the usual method. Now, in innovative design, I very much believe in making models. Sketching first, obviously, then making models. Now, these models we made in '58. I'm sorry for the shadow of them, but you can see coming down how to do the frame, always taking the initiative of the small wheels. We'd done a lot of work, by the way, with Dunlop on the development of the small wheels, and so the tires. So we had that benefit. And then coming down, and so the one that we actually made, you can see it, a sort of monocoque. The styling was structure, making a sheet metal aluminium. So the one we actually made was this. There we are. There's my Hitchens there, in comparison with the first prototype. It was a very thin 24, 26 gauge aluminium riveted. It had front suspension. And the performance was extremely good, the stability and all that was good. But the noise it made was unbelievable. So I thought, here we are in the automotive business, trying not to make a noise, and this blasted thing, you've gone and made a noisy bicycle. How crazy. So absolutely not that at all. So, but the concept of the convenience of the thing, the performance of it, the acceleration of it was there, but not that terrible noise. So. So here are, these are sketches, 1959. So that one is a sketch by Alec. Now, Alec Issigonis, he hated any form of physical activity. And he loathed the idea of a bicycle. He said, the wheels, what are you doing? And if you've got to have two wheels, don't have two wheels, have four wheels, put an engine in. So the idea of a two-wheel thing was an abomination. But he was intrigued with the design problem thing. And so here was his design mind, doing a styling, if you like, on my aluminium, the first one that I'd done. And he said, oh, you ought to make the shape and stuff like that. And so there it is. And you see, he even got a funny little feeling of a sort of styling of rear luggage carrier thing. So that was a charming idea. But so then the next one, so that we used to have lunch in the round room at Longbridge, and these were our menu cards. So I said, no, what we're doing is this. So I got his menu card, which he was sitting over there. I got to there, and I did a sketch of what we're doing. So there is, that date is there in 56. There you, I think it's 50, no, 59, but there you see the menu. So there it is, with essentially going to the F-frame, still keeping some weather protection, and still keeping not sort of fancy rear carrier, but with the F-frame, one big tube there, and two uprights there. So that was the concept, the start of the concept of the Moulton Bicycle. And that's the pattern drawing. I was trying at that time to make making the unifying the rear suspension there with the front suspension, making it a common thing. It was a good, proper idea. You can see the F-frame, and you can see the absurd occupation of space, which of a classical bicycle, you see, and liberated by the small wheel, and also that abomination there of the costume where you get trapped. So now this is an example of a grave mistake that I noticed in that bicycle being put into the back of a Morris Traveller, and after we doing some tests, and I saw as it was put in horizontally, put in like that. Goodness me, the front wheel didn't flop over. Now, all bicycles, you know, if you put it in the horizontal, the front wheel flops over, which is a fun. So I had blundered into, like an idiot that I was, of putting the mass on the back side, on the rear side of the axis. So fundamentally, it was absolutely against any handling things. So I learned that lesson. So in no way should one put mass there behind the steering axis, because you'll get the single track bicycle want to turn in, the wheel want to turn towards the curve, not the other way. So I learned that. So never again does one to go cheapy and trying to make that the same as that. It doesn't work. So there it was in '63, cleaned up. As you can see, the completely different front to rear. That was a single telescopic. Now, the front of this extraordinary shaped bicycle made me very nervous to go on the market. So it was rude enough, disturbing enough to the classic, not to be too provocative. So I had originally had the aircraft landing gear link there, which we've gone back to that. So I said, no, we'll have a single telescopic thing, so to make it look neat. And then the rear, there's the rear suspension, all nestled into the single tube. So it's rather clean. So I was moved by appearance. Now, I soon had the laws of nature attacked me pretty quickly. So that fork blade was inspired by that fork blade. They weren't the same, but it inspired. And very soon the blasted thing bent, of course, it wouldn't do. So in that direction, it's all right. But having the levers like that, so I very soon went straight. So there's an example. Never allow aesthetics to overcome engineering rigor. But that was, I learned that lesson pretty sharply. So there it was. Now, we made 300 a week on. In those days, of course, one did conveyor belts, whereas now one does all more cell production. But we did 300 a week out of that, and absolutely inundated with orders. Now that's a nice view. You see, at the time of the '60s, the bowler hat, a real bowler hat, and there it's not a laptop; it's a briefcase on the front there, properly mounted on the frame, and he was smiling. So the cars there, you see, that's nice. There's the period of the cars there. And so in the first decade, we'd effectively made 150,000. So we were thoroughly established. And even all the time, by the way, we were proving, I was determined, if you're going to make, have the the cheek to threaten, or not to threaten, but to challenge the classic. Be careful that it performs better. So my concern right at the beginning was to prove the speed of it, and so that is John Woodburn on one of the actual show bikes with enormous chain wheel, you see, 100-inch gear and a 4-speed semi-archer hub. He beat the record, held, but over many years constantly been beaten. 24 miles an hour average from Cardiff to London. So that proved demonstrated the performance of the bicycle. And then again, now here are the butts. Now the Coventry men will recognize the butts. I think it's pulled down now. It's probably a shopping centre or something on it. But it was, and there's Mick Ives, Mick Ives used to work at Dunlop. He's I think I've got him. But anyway, we had the Coventry team against the Leicester team, and not only did it break the record, the track record, but it closed up on the pursuit. So that was another demonstration of the superiority of our bicycle over the classic. There they are. And very soon, by the way, of course, it was emerging that the cyclists, racing cyclists, wouldn't have it. For this reason, a very human reason, that in a bunch, you have I'm not talking about pursuit, but in a bunch on the road, if you have a strange vehicle in the bunch, they don't like it, the other people don't like it. Also, you can get up closer for drafting with our small wheel than vice versa. That wasn't good news. So sooner or later, and then the other thing happened, which is a very human thing, the other thing happened was that if John Woodburn, he's gone, but John Woodburn, he would never say, he didn't break the record, and very often we did some speed trials and so on. So if he didn't win, it was because the bicycle was worse. If he did win, of course, he was a superior rider. So you can't win. So I really believe that in an athletic sport, that the instruments should be common. So that if you want to just enjoy it going faster. So now that's Tommy Simpson at Herne Hill track, and on the speed bike. Tommy Simpson, as you know, was our one English rider who did so well in the Tour de France, and then eventually died on the hill. I think he was drugged, but of course, drug is an indigenous activity in cycle racing. But he said that he made this remark, having tried it at the Herne Hill track in '63, he would ride it on the Tour de France. He wasn't riding with Persia. So that was a nice commendation. And then there's another thing, riding took a bull. Then in '69, the long tour, the ultimate tour, and there's an amusing tale on that. I just said that I'm closing in a minute. That I didn't want to derail a gear. When this young man, Colin Marty, approached me to ride to Australia, I said, well, it's a hell of a long way to do. And I was worried about I wouldn't put derailleur gear. At that time, I was nervous of derailleur gear for that extreme condition. And so the Fichtel and Sarks, the Germans, made a very nice 2-speed gear with a kickback brake, and so it was absolutely the right thing. So we'd fitted a 2-speed hub and 2 sides of chain wheel. So the inner chain wheel and outer chain wheel, and corresponding larger and smaller sprockets. So one could, in the hilly country, simply take the same chain and put it on the smaller one. So I was then worried about reliability. So I said to Fichtel and Sarks in Germany, I said to them, what do you think which spares we should need in a ride to Australia? Sort of stupid sort of remark to make. And so they wrote, we have no experience of riding, with no smile at all, we have no experience of riding to Australia. So I'd been to Fickler and Sachs and seen their testing. They were very strong, but being German, they made this rather unamusing remark. So I said, well, I better provide a spare. So, because it would be terrible, this man on this terrible journey. He's running to Australia. So that he'd go to Kabul. So I said we'd have a spare hub. So he had a spare hub. And he's very much alive, Colin Martin. He's just recently, he's now 35 years later, he's just ridden across Australia on the current Moulton Bicycle. So he's absolute Moulton Bicycle enthusiast. So I said, now, what about that hub? Oh, he said, that hub, I knew by the time I got there, I knew that nothing was going wrong with the thing. I wasn't going to carry this damn weight with me, so I buried it. So they then said, I wonder what the Americans with their mine-sweeping thing will... Nice contemporary remark. So that was that. So now, then came this thing. I won't go into politics, but I did mention that this big corporation, Raleigh, to whom I'd offered this thing to be made back in 59, 60, to the chairman, George Wilson, who said how interesting, the most interesting thing he'd seen in his professional life at Raleigh. He must just talk to his people back at Nottingham. So they obviously took one look at this damn thing of mine and said to themselves, in no way we're going to have this. So I did it myself. But when there was such a success on the market, they were entirely moved by remorse. And when you have a big corporation in full remorse mode, you're in trouble. And so what they'd done, they'd made the thing in a manner of, you see, they thought, well, don't want suspension, just put a fat tire on, and you don't want this and that. So they copied the F-frame, etc. So they did the typical corporation thing. They were slow in the provision of the Sturmey Archer gear, which was owned by them. They were also made it difficult for us to enter the shops. So I did a distress sale very wisely, because to competing with them in the manner of a bicycle was hopeless. So I sold out to them. So that was really that. And then, so that just summarized it. They were nearing the end, by the way, so let's hang on for a bit. Now, what I did then, as it were, going out in the wilderness, I was doing plenty of work, suspension work for the automobile, but I was still very, very curious about, was I right? I mean, obviously, Raleigh was enormously long with those stupid fat tires, but was I right about the superiority which I was showing in racing and showing in these high-speed things? Was I fundamentally right, or was the rider better that I happened to use? Fundamentally, was I right? So what I did, that's Keevil, a hangar at Keevil Aerodrome near Bradford. I said, we'll do some proper measurements. So we set up, that's in the days of there's a cathode oscilloscope there, and there was the bicycle there. There's the bicycle. I did a dynamometer on the crank. I think Shimano are doing one. I think you actually buy one now, but that was in 1970 something. So it's got a dynamometer, a strain gauge on the crank, so which is floating. So then the strain gauge, the electrical message of the strain gauge was by a wire being unwound, and then going back to this man there on a fishing reel of the wire going back down. So as the thing goes round in a circle like that, the electrical, we didn't telemetry in those days. We didn't know about it, didn't trust very much. So it was a direct reading of what is the strain gauge reading, what is the torque actually being supplied by the rider to go at that speed, being recorded through the wire at the oscilloscopes there. So we can actually measure scientifically and properly measure the values. And so there they are. So the bicycle, we did it with a conventional, the conventional one I think was a Carlton. The same weight, was absolutely the same, a proper done scientific test. The same rider. And we had a string on his head so he would keep the height of the, his frontal area was always a constant. So the same rider, one after the other, that. So the bicycle weight was quite heavy, 29 pounds. on both. So it's a proper scientific test. And so there are the results. There's the riders, there to there, there to there, there to there, same year. And then you can see the whole parcel of which the racing, the high pressure racing tower, the 17 tower, was about a few percent better than the corresponding tire pressure with a large wheel. So that is basically bound up in two things: air resistance, and also the fact that a sprung thing is you're not losing energy by the thing jumping off. So that was the proof, which is deeply satisfactory. So that's it. So then, just coming quickly to the end. I was resolved then to go back into bicycles again in a small way, and that was the birth of the X-frame. I was riding in France with a friend of mine with a Y frame, and he said, "Oh, come down and see my friend who's a racing cyclist." So there we are in France, I think Arabanche, and there it is his bike, and he's racing, so Frenchman. Far too heavy. Oh my God, you're right. So I was very, very put off by this remark. I didn't defend it at all. I said, "You're bloody well right. Your racing bicycle is much lighter than mine, as though I'm on the wrong track." So I did a fundamental thing of changing completely the structure of it, that was the birth of the X-frame and then the space frame. So that was the birth of it. But actually, being driven by reality, he was quite right, this Frenchman. The bicycle was too heavy. So I've been getting them lighter ever since. And fatigue testing, always going back to fundamental testing. And then I thought whether it was being acceptable on the visually acceptable. I was very frightened about it. I did possibly insulted on the first people. Okay, but now I was going to insult people with a bicycle like that. So they're checking in 1979, I think, was it acceptable visually? I was very nervous about that, but I was advised that it might be, so went ahead and then launched it in '83, and so then very much going on racing. That was in Toronto, I think, and there out with the superior cornering again. That's very nice. Why he won that race. That was in Canada, where they didn't have these type regulations. They had the speed record, and then more aerodynamic things. And now that's amusing, because I'm going to recommend that in this human-powered vehicle things, which should be studied for the future very much, but one should have another look, possibly at recumbents. But be careful that that's our streamlined bicycle, which is fairly impractical because of instability in the wind, but it's jolly fast. And here he is out cornering, you see, the three-wheeler there in a race. So we just say that now we just come here to finish with that, and what I want to just touch on is the train. Now, would you do that? Just summarizing, then I'm just coming to the end. It's summarizing. Now we'll have just finally, if you read that, finally just have a look at this, because this is a bit of fun. It's very much Bugatti. Now, Grizzly, it's Nigel Grizzly, who's the chief engineer of the London North Eastern. He had been to France and had enjoyed seeing the Bugatti rail cars. And he had noticed that, it's all recorded in the Bugatti book, I think, that by Hugh Conway, that he noticed that the rail cars disturbed less air on the rail track by virtue of pushing the air up. And it was not streamlining in the normal sense of reducing the drag. It was essentially to avoid, when two trains are passing, Bugatti wanted to interfere less with the side force. And he Grizzly had noticed that the wind had been the bluff nose of the Bugatti rail car had done it, put the air up. So he copied that. Grizzly copied that, and that I think is a silver link. which are on the London North Eastern Civic, and which eventually became the speed records, you know. But you see that very nicely done. So the influence of the French then on the English, which is very good. And then, now look at this, the most amazing thing of all, and this is where I end, that Bugatti was postulated a train, a high-speed train. This is 1939, a high-speed train which absolutely preempts, if you like, the TGV. I mean, this is a steam train. Those are the condensers down the side, and we'll have a look at those are the bogies there. Then it goes back there. So that was 1939, and apparently he had got a commission from the French rails. I don't know which it was, PLM, or which it was, but he had a commission to build this. But it was interrupted by the war, but he had achieved this. Now, can you imagine that? There is, I think, the most thrilling thing I've seen. Now, there are straight eight single-acting steam engines where the crankshaft is the axle. Now, that's pretty nice, isn't it? You imagine the multi-cylinder, but perfectly sensible. After all, the inside crank of a locomotive is on the axle. I mean, the crank is the axle. So he's done a good job. In fact, the 8 cylinders, you imagine that axle, what it would look like. And why not roller bearings? Why not? So there are 4 of them on each of the axles. So that was the intriguing thing. And apparently it was at least on the test bed. There it is on the test bed. But I want to find out, I wonder whether there is any result amongst you Bugatti enthusiasts, any results available anywhere of the test results of that, because it was run. I mean, there it is on a dynamometer. There is the engine, so it must have existed. It looks at the pipes. So that would be a fascinating thing, wouldn't it be? A steam engine by Bugatti with the axle, the crankshaft, the axle. That's wonderful. So that's it. There we are.